This video is brought to you by Mario. Not that Mario. This Mario, my pro bono lawyer who represented me against an alleged scammer. I don't even know if Mario wants an advertisement. I didn't ask him, but nevertheless, thank you, you and your magnificent beard, for representing me. And before we continue, this video contains some heavy stuff, journal entries from an actual school to assault in a prison shower. Proceed with caution. Imagine this. You're playing a video game with a toxic community, so just about any online game. It's 2 a.m., peak degeneracy hour, and a conversation between you and another player devolves rapidly. You egg them on, and they troll you back. An edgelord duel commences. He tells you to kill yourself. You scoff and mutter, "Amateur mistake." You fire back, "I intend to kill myself, but I'm going to kill other people first." Checkmate, you think. However, he's unfazed by your response. He provokes you further. Do us a favor, do it now. It's unclear who's winning the edgelord duel until you say the unthinkable, the nuclear option. You are crowned as the true edgelord, or so you thought.
Several days later, federal authorities raided the home, and Pillault's been in jail ever since.
I had no clue why they were there, man. I mean, I'm talking about, they were like 50 field agents, man. They were all over my house. They were on top of it. They were climbing up the sides of it. Guns out, just ready to go.
This is Josh Pillault. He's the guy who went on a podcasting circuit telling his story of how he spent years in federal prison for saying he was going to shoot up a school in Runescape. But I wondered, how legit was his story? Was he a disturbed individual that authorities rightfully put behind bars, or did he get lambasted by the legal system? I wanted to find out. This is the actual in-game chat transcript as was submitted by Jagex, the creators behind RuneScape. And this is Josh, the punk gamer who said he would ship a school. Josh claims someone in chat had brought up the game Super Columbine RPG. Red Fox overheard this discussion and was demanding everyone nearby to stop talking about this controversial game. Josh claims he didn't really have a position about whether the game was good or not, he just didn't like being told what to do. Josh says, 1. School are great, and 2. I'm damn sure no. Later, Red Fox calls Josh a pussy and taunts Josh into killing himself. Josh says he needs to get guns, as well as more ammo, pipe bombs, and Molotov cocktails. And here's where Josh takes it too far. He gives the location of his high school as the target, stating that it will be leveled to gravel. The prosecutors would use this language later to charge him with an additional terroristic crime. This is because Josh made threats against individuals and property. Red Fox and Josh go back and forth, and then Josh gives Red Fox his last name and the date when the attack will happen. He tells Red Fox he will see it on the news. Red Fox continues to badger Josh for not killing himself. It's almost getting repetitive at this point. For brevity, Red Fox will troll Josh for the remainder of the transcript to himself. Josh chats about RuneScape-related topics for a bit, but then he tries to annoy Red Fox by spamming messages about not forgetting the Columbine Massacre. Josh states it's always provoked, insinuating that he might be provoked by Red Fox. And then Josh says he can't wait to blow the brains out of skulls and the world's gonna know his wrath. It was a reckless and dumb thing to say. And no matter how much of a free speech advocate you are, threats like these must be investigated. Red Fox tells Josh his account is history and says, knock knock. Josh speculates Red Fox was implying the police would be at his door, and Josh wasn't wrong. But what did the feds find at Josh's house? Josh didn't own any guns, and he didn't have bomb-making materials or anything like that. But even still, he said he would kill people and blow up a school. During the investigation, Josh was a straight shooter. That's probably the wrong term to use. Josh was very transparent during the whole process, and whether he was guilty or not is a moot point because he ended up pleading guilty, waiving the possibility for a trial. When I spoke with Josh, he freely admits he was not a good person at the time. He just wasn't a school shooter.
I was actively doing lots of drugs and alcohol. I think that my mother was in big denial about that to a certain extent and was letting me lie about it. And pretty much all of my interactions in life were very manipulative in nature. Mostly tending towards my alcoholism and drug abuse, honestly.
He knew he messed up, but after spending 9 months in jail before sentencing, he figured he would be out of jail, ready to move on with his life. At sentencing, Josh was surprised when he was given 3 times the max federal guideline for the crime. So I dug into the court documents, and there were 2 factors that the sentencing judge used against Josh. The first were these journals and notes that Josh had been writing in jail. The vast majority of them were guitar tabs and lyrics to his rap songs. The prosecution found a handful of lines that were quite violent. And before we get into this, I just want to say Josh told me that he doesn't make excuses for writing negative things about people. He was young and dumb, and he's different now. and some of these notes he sent me have never been seen outside of the courtroom. The prosecution sifted through his notes and found lyrics like this, most likely directed at Josh's ex-girlfriends. So to the girls in this song who feel like they were done wrong, you stupid you deserved it all along. So listen up, here's your warning, stay back. And later he writes, "Then I'm coming for you, you can't hide, I swear. I'll cut the neck open till you're gurgling for air." In the court documents, they reference journal entries where Josh writes about his dream in which one of the Columbine shooters gave Josh a weapon. Josh describes killing, quote, "fucking teachers and spraying everyone. It makes me smile. That type of power would drive you wild." Not a great look for someone who is being accused of shooting up a school. He also had lyrics to music explaining himself. "And Gabby Giffords got shot in the head, but she survived and she's alive and she was supposed to be dead. Humanity is beautiful and strong, but at the same time, we're up, stuck up, and corrupt in our own mind. When you got guys like me who say offensive shit just to piss people off and get a rise out of it, but then turn around and donate to charity too, to try to make the world a better fucking place for these fools. But then I land in jail for months on end because I said some stupid shit and went too far again."
It was just influenced a lot by Eminem and Tyler, the Creator. Still said a lot of things I shouldn't have said and that I wouldn't say if I was like a hip hop artist or something today. You know, my mindset still changed, but it was a joke. And it was still the First Amendment nonetheless.
Josh's house was raided by the feds in 2012. For context, this was after the Virginia Tech shootings, and his sentencing hearing was shortly after the Sandy Hook shooting in late 2012. The courts and the police authorities were being heavily scrutinized for mishandling school shooters. Political pressure was mounting. Something needed to be done. Josh was positioned to be an example of what happens when you fuck around and find out. In 1999, Eric Harris, one of the Columbine shooters, had a website where he published a hit list, and he also had a page explicitly talking about how to make pipe bombs and various other tactics to kill people. The website was reported to the school and to the police more than a year before the massacre, but neither the school or police did anything with the information.
This is 98-5504, the incident report that we filed in 1998. He and I had turned Eric into the police a year earlier and 2 years earlier for having pipe bombs and weapons and detonating pipe bombs.
This is Randy Brown, a concerned parent who had reported the Columbine shooters well in advance.
We're sorry. We're upset that we didn't do more to let people know what happened here. And we live with the guilt of knowing that maybe we could have done more, although we spent 7 years fighting it after Columbine, yelling at the Attorney General in meetings, all kinds of things we tried to do. Spent 7 years on our life on it. It didn't help.
When Eric and Dylan, the Columbine shooters, were arrested for breaking into a van and stealing electronics, the judge placed them into a diversion program, allowing them to stay in school, completely ignoring the website Eric had made. To make matters worse, Eric, like Josh, was a gamer. He created maps for Doom, and in one of the README files for Eric's map, he threatened to, quote, blow you up if you modify the files without his permission. He even adds, and it will be cool. And similar to Josh, Eric also kept journals. His writing wasn't edgy though. It was absolutely deplorable. Evil. Here are a few excerpts for comparison. Kill all retards, people with brain f***s, drug addicts. People spend millions of dollars on saving the lives of retards. And why? I don't buy that shit like, oh, he's my son though? So what? He ain't normal. Kill him. I want to try to put some mines and trip bombs around this town too, maybe. Get a few extra frags on the scoreboard. All gays should be killed. Lesbians are fun to watch if they're hot, but still, it's not human. It's f***ing disease. Women, you will always be under men. It's been seen throughout nature. Males are almost always doing the dangerous shit while women stay back. If you recall your history, the Nazis came up with a final solution to the Jewish problem. Them all. Well, in case you haven't figured it out yet, I say, no one should survive. Randy Brown was so frustrated his report led to nothing that he wrote about it in the local paper. It's clear now that the authorities have a role to look for evidence that someone is dangerous. Just the fact that Josh had journals and that there was anything violent in them at all looked terrible for his case. How did the prosecution find the journals? In jail, Josh's cellmate, Arthur Burke, a registered sex offender, reported Josh to his lawyer as having some violent lyrics in one of his rap songs. Problem was, Josh and Arthur had the same lawyer. This created a conflict of interest. Josh's lawyer had to recuse himself from the case, and Josh was assigned a new lawyer, which, according to Josh, was less passionate about the case. His new lawyer would later become a federal judge. And in retrospect, it was not likely that this particular lawyer would work extra hard to represent a school shooter. I'm not saying that his lawyer did anything unlawful or unethical, but he wasn't trying to get Josh off easy.
My public defenders that I had initially were fired up to take this to court, and they essentially told me that I was going to have to be a martyr. One of them said, "You're probably going to be in jail for at least a year, but don't plead guilty, don't give in." This was a public defender, man. He already had a lot on his plate, but he said that this case, this is the time and the place for this. We're going to get to the bottom of this if this goes all the way to Supreme Court, but you're probably going to be in jail for a while. We've got to get this online threats thing settled. So this pedophile finds out I'm rapping. He's got the same public defender as me. He goes to his public defenders and says, "I want to testify against a guy in the jail." They now have to file for conflict of interest and stop representing me. Then I got flip-flop pancaked over to a guy who shook my hand and said, "You got to plead guilty to this." Now, when you have somebody like my initial public defenders, they were they're the kind of guys that you expect to be public defenders. They're public defenders because they had a fire in them and they didn't like seeing people, you met them and you're like, this guy is fired up for the people, And then I get this guy and I'm talking about from the second he shook my hand, I was like, oh man, this is not going to be good. He sat down and he basically said, "So I've reread this law. You cannot be found not guilty of this. The law says if you said it, that's the crime." And
what Josh did was like yelling bomb after boarding a plane a few days after 9/11. You just don't go there. It was a difficult case because from the prosecutor's point of view, Josh fit the shooter MO. It would be an impossible task to get an older judge to understand the subtle nuance of what constitutes a true threat in the context of a Runescape chat at 2 a.m.
I don't know if you know or not, but during my original detainment hearing, the prosecutor compared me to Eric and Dylan. And this was the entirety of his checklist was, he's considered to be pretty intelligent, he plays video games, and he's been in trouble with the police. And I was like, bro, if you go down every other list of aspects of our entire personality, it's completely different. But those 3 points, I guess, make me Eric Harris. Okay.
And just when you thought the case was going about as bad as it could, Josh essentially said, "Okay, boomer," to the judge right before sentencing.
And let me tell you, all three of their heads turned completely bright red. The judge and both of the prosecutors got so mad when I said that we weren't in the same generation. I don't know why. I'm 30, man, and if an 18-year-old walks up to me and says, "Bro, you're not in my generation," I'm going to say, "Yeah, I know." But I basically got up there and told them the only reason you think this is wrong is because you're old.
In the court's eye, Josh was a degenerate loser. And in Josh's own opinion, he doesn't necessarily disagree. He was getting high and drinking with his girlfriend every day. How were you able to play video games all day and have enough money to get high and drink and things like that?
A couple times, I'll be straight up honest with you, man, on selling fake drugs. He sold fake acid a couple times, and also my girlfriend was working a job, and she had steady money in a good bank account and was more than happy to get me a bottle a day, basically. With my manipulation, I think that if she had the clarity of thought of not me lying to her and bending it and things, that, she probably would have stopped buying it. But she was fueling me with alcohol, and I was sometimes selling paper for a couple $100 from time to time and eating food at my mom's house. And that was life for me. I was good with that at that time for some reason.
He had his problems, for sure. But here's where the story gets more interesting. I was surprised to read that the sentencing judge gave Josh 3 times the max recommended sentence, which totaled to 6 years in federal prison. What did the judge base this off of? Outside of Josh's journals and notes, which the prosecution cherry-picked to make him seem like a cold-blooded killer, Josh's ex-girlfriends testified against him. One of his exes testified that Josh had gone to the hardware store and bought materials to make pipe bombs. When I read this, my heart sank. Maybe Josh was a troubled teen who at the time had extreme emotional problems. Maybe he was planning to do something heinous. But according to Josh, the ex-girlfriend, who we will call Jane, was being told what to say by the prosecution. Josh claims that Jane was even given a PowerPoint to look over. It's okay for the prosecution to coach their witness on strategy. For example, it's usually smart to tell witnesses to answer questions concisely and to not give more information than what was asked. The goal of witness preparation is to help the witness feel more comfortable and confident when testifying and to ensure they provide truthful and complete information. But you can't tell a witness what the facts are. It needs to be their testimony. But why would Jane testify against Josh? Allegedly, according to Josh, Jane was dating the prosecutor's son. This is already a conflict of interest, but to make matters worse, Jane was a legal adult, having turned 18, but her boyfriend, the prosecutor's son, was underage. They leveraged this against her, threatening to prosecute her if she didn't testify. Josh made a YouTube video where he shows some of the conversation he had with Jane via text. He redacts her name, phone number, and some of the details in the messages.
And a lot of this is censored, not just for her names and their names, but also because it's legally sensitive for any future actions that may arise.
I trusted Josh's text 100% and didn't question the validity of them at all. Excuse me, I just got a text message from my friend Jeffrey Bezos. Making a vid, one sec. Dude, this guy will not leave me alone. Oh, hell yeah. We'll get to the validity of the text in a minute, but let's first talk about what Jane admitted to. Josh shows text messages revealing that she claims to be told what to say by the prosecutors. Josh asked Jane if the prosecutor told her what to say in a PowerPoint. She confirms. However, I was a bit skeptical because it wouldn't be wrong for them to go over her testimony and walk through the questions and answers ahead of time in a PowerPoint. Josh asks a few more questions, trying to figure out if they wanted her to change any of her answers. She says nothing because I just memorized the PowerPoint. She admits that she was supposed to say that Josh had materials to make a pipe bomb and adds, I don't know what that even is really. Jane even admitted to confirming details about pipe bombs, but says she didn't even understand what she was confirming. This became a huge deal to Josh because the sentencing judge specifically cited Jane's testimony as proof that Josh was not making idle threats. We don't know what actually happened in the room where Jane gave the deposition, but if I were a prosecutor and I wanted to win this case at all costs, I would have gotten Jane to admit that Josh was capable of buying items for a pipe bomb. I'd ask her if he was in possession of a pipe, for example, or a household material like nails. I don't want this video to be flagged by YouTube, but you can imagine that after a line of questioning and pressure, Jane could say that Josh had materials for a pipe bomb, even though she has no knowledge of what makes a pipe bomb. Josh offers to marry Jane if she comes forth with the information. Jane says she is scared of them and fears being put in jail and registering as a sex offender. And then she says something puzzling. I've been too scared to tell the truth, but being sober is based on a program of rigorous honesty and doing the right thing, and I think I did in this instance. I don't want to talk about the fact that I was facing a possession of child pornography charge. This statement about honesty is puzzling because it could be interpreted that she wasn't lying in her deposition. But the second statement contradicts the first because it implies that she doesn't want to be truthful about what's going on. Josh doubles down on his marriage proposal, and Jane reiterates that she could still go to prison. The judge justifies his harsh sentencing by pointing out that it seems to me that other witnesses who really had no reason to lie testified otherwise. Josh's lawyer responds, they were ex-girlfriends, Your Honor. And the judge responds, okay, well, I'm going to overrule your objection there because I found that their testimony more believable than his, in that his testimony was self-serving. The judge references objection number 4 that he denied making Molotov cocktails based on the other young ladies testified that he did, or that he had attempted to. Josh's lawyer points out that that same witness had lied several times on the stand and contradicted herself. And the judge responds, you contradicted her on that, but not on the Molotov cocktails. Josh's lawyer points out that this compromises her credibility as a witness. The judge says, well, I'm the one judging the credibility of the witnesses, and I think she was credible, and I'm going to overrule your objection there. This justified the judge's departure from the recommended sentencing guidelines, and it didn't help that Josh pointed out to the judge that he didn't understand online gaming. I asked Josh to send me all of the unredacted text messages. I looked through them and I didn't find any evidence of tampering. But I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to validate these text messages. If they were real, this means that Josh's case hinged on false information. I firmly believe that without Jane's testimony, the judge wouldn't have punished Josh so severely. Josh showed me an email from YouTube with Jane's comments. They didn't deny the conversation happened. She just didn't like that he redacted parts where he called her baby. Jane used her full name in her YouTube profile, but Josh never mentioned her full name in the video, so I knew this wasn't just some random troll. And it took hours of reading through court documents to find her name after doing an open records request of the trial documents. While I was still skeptical, everything started to make sense. Even still, Josh could have faked a YouTube account to make it seem like his ex was commenting on YouTube. But there's one more clue. In Josh's text messages with Jane, you can see the beginning of a phone number. It's missing a few digits on the end, but most of the phone number is there. It looks something like this. I did some investigation work and found a yearbook from Jane's high school estimating her age, and I did some skip tracing. I dug up one of her previous phone numbers, and sure enough, it matched. Josh's story checks out. Unfortunately, the number is no longer active. I hired several people to try to track her down, and no luck. The next question is, why wasn't Josh able to get Jane to come forward and show how the prosecution manipulated her in the depositions? Outside of her being worried that she would go to jail herself, Josh had gotten engaged with a different girl. This made Jane furious with him because Josh told Jane that if she worked with him to report the prosecutors for unethical behavior, he'd marry her. Josh never had any intention of doing that. He was desperate, and he knew that her testimony destroyed his credibility. No matter how you feel about this case, the story of a troll getting their medicine, or perhaps the government destroying the life of an innocent gamer, I think most of us would agree a 6-year federal prison sentence was overkill.
Case is not as black and white as it seems. I was not a good dude. I was a drug addict. I was an alcoholic. I was very manipulative, man. I was really very egotistical and worried about myself. I was not a murderer. That's the end of the discussion as far as I was concerned. I've never once been upset, even from the beginning, with them raiding my house and arresting me and detaining me, man. I've always understood that. It's how far they went to prove I was going to do something I wasn't going to do. I get that I was a bad guy. I understand I'm not that judge's definition of an upstanding man, but I didn't deserve prison for 6 years for that. And this should not happen to other people. I came out great. Sober now, married, got kids, I get to do YouTube and Twitch, play RuneScape all day. Everybody else wouldn't have turned out like that necessarily, and that's why there's a grave responsibility on their part to not let things like this happen.
Which leads us to our next story. Justin Carter, a League of Legends gamer who was charged with making terroristic threats online in a Facebook message. After being called crazy, he pressed the edgelord nuclear option and said, "I'm f***ed in the head all right. I think I'm going to shoot up a kindergarten and watch the blood of the innocent rain down and eat the beating heart of one of them."
I was talking to a girl on Facebook who invited me to come troll some Facebook group of other teens who were taking selfies and saying, "Rate me." So we were like, okay, we'll rate the selfies and we'll just troll and say, haha, ugly, even though they're not ugly. And so I would do that. And then I would private message the people and be like, you should not be posting selfies and asking people to roast you, basically. Like, maybe think about that. Like, and I would be nice in private, but I'd be posting like, oh, you're ugly this and ugly that. And people said, you're effed up in the head. And I said, oh, yeah, man, I'm so effed up in the head. I think I'm going to shoot up a kindergarten and watch the blood of the innocent rain down and eat the still beating hearts out of one of them, And then I wrote, lol, JK, I would never actually do that. But the point was to make a very hyperbolic statement of like, no, this is what someone who's fucked up in the head does. What I'm doing is, trolling, but it's not fucked up in the head. So that was the intended goal of that statement. However, it was screenshotted out of context by one of the user's moms in Canada, and she sent it into the tip line in America.
Justin had no idea he had been reported for anything and was in a break room at work when he was arrested.
They called my boss while I was in the office with him. I found out later they told him I was a terrorist, wanted. The officers come in with guns drawn. They say, drop the taco. And straight up. It was fucking, that part's funny to me. I don't know. I have two randos pointing guns at me. I genuinely have no idea what's going on. They're not introducing themselves as police officers or anything like that. Once they start putting handcuffs on me, I kind of get that they're police officers, and I'm shaking. I'm in tears. They're saying, if you run, we will shoot you. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to run, man. Can I know what I did wrong? Like, what did I do? You know what you did. That's what they told me.
He was sent to jail where he sat for months without an official charge. Like Josh, Justin didn't own guns or any weapon at all. Not that it even mattered. The feds didn't even search his room. And like Josh, Justin admitted to everything without speaking to a lawyer.
They wait 6 months to send anyone to the place that I was living at, which was actually a roommate. I guess they somehow expected the roommate to keep my room as it was for 6 months and not rent it out somehow. So I don't know. They found nothing because there was nothing there. And when they went in and looted it, they found nothing except for my computer. And the computer had just, whatever they needed to prove that I made the post, which they never actually did.
It turns out the feds needed his testimony to move forward with the charges. All they had was a screenshot of what he said, and in that screenshot, the LOL JK part was cut off.
So 80 days in, I'm getting questioned for the first time regarding the case, and they ask me, did I post it? And my thought is, be honest, be truthful, say it's a big misunderstanding, you weren't serious, and They don't want to waste their time and resources. Like, just they'll let you out. So I'm honest with the officers, dumb me, and I admit to making the post. And that ends up being the only thing they got to indict me.
And if you're ever being investigated by the feds, don't have an ex-girlfriend.
Some girl I dated for 2 days in high school, as a, you know what I mean, some ridiculous thing, said that I was stalking her, which was completely untrue, filed a restraining order against me. And I told the officer then, I said, can I file one back? This girl's crazy because I don't know her like at all like this. But they did find this girl and get her to give them an interview in which she says negative things about me.
The same thing happened to Josh. It's
High
like they have a
school.
little playbook. Luckily, a First Amendment organization took Justin's case, and he was able to make the lofty $500,000 bail. Part of Justin's bond conditions prevented him from using the internet, and he couldn't be anywhere where children could congregate. Justin couldn't even stay with his dad due to having younger siblings. He became homeless, living out of his car for a while.
You can't go anywhere where children may gather. Now, I asked the judge what that means. That's anywhere. As long, I mean, not bars, basically, and not anywhere where you're 18 only, or home. So they basically advised me to just stay home. For 7 years, I'm on lockdown at home, and they offered me a way out by saying, well, we'll downgrade it to a misdemeanor and time served, and you'll be done today. And so what am I supposed to do? Say no to that? No, I'm desperate. So yeah, I had to say yes, basically. And in the agreement, I can't sue them. And there's no harm done basically on their end is what they're saying.
And in 2020, after 6 months in jail and 7 years of living in the shadows, it was all over. Justin was 18 years old at the time of his arrest. He was working at an audio video business, and now his life was completely turned upside down.
I was doing AV work when I was young, alongside my father. So I did AV work in Austin. I was on a track. They were going to make me a driver next. They were teaching me how to drive so I could drive the truck, so I could get more money and do more jobs and go solo events. And they were teaching me how to do leadership at 18.
I think we can all agree authorities should investigate serious threats. And we can't let people off scot-free when they threaten the lives of other people. But understanding the context of the speech is important. Society wasn't better off with Justin in prison. He went from being a productive member of society with no prior arrests to being traumatized for life.
During that week, I was threatened multiple times by some violent potential gang members, and I was warned to not go into the shower or the bathroom. Like, I did not go to the number 2 for a week.
And this jail, this is not like general jail for like someone who got knocked up on a DUI or something. This is like...
No. Yeah, like, so these pods in jails, they're for long-term stay.
This is more serious stuff, right?
People caught up on murder charges are there.
You can't really know what's going to happen to someone if they're thrown in jail. Will they become a seasoned career criminal? Or will prison inflict lifelong damage, rendering them a shell of a person they once were? I asked Josh where he would be had he not been arrested.
I would be dead. No, I had started dabbling in opiates. I was driving and drinking. I was a little bit caught up on the concept of the 27 Club because I was obsessed with rock stars, and I also had ideations of self-harm, which the government used against me very badly, that I've been open about in therapy in the past. And no, man, I don't think I had much time left had I not gotten snatched up, honestly. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's the truth if you could see the trajectory of my drug addiction.
Unlike Josh, Justin's experience in prison will plague him the rest of his life.
The whole time I'm in there, I'm like, this is a mistake. Any day, they're going to realize it's a mistake, and I'm free, you know? That's what I'm coping with. And they knock on the pod. They say, you know, Justin Carter, come, you bring your stuff, get your stuff. You're going, you're leaving. I'm thinking, oh, thank God, this is it, man. I'm done. I'm free. It's over. They realize their mistake. I'm not going to get assaulted. Everything's going to end up being okay. And so I go, they get me dressed in my regular clothes. Guy who's escorting me doesn't know everything, so he's not telling me what's going on. I got dressed in my real clothes and treated like I was going to leave, like, just for the transfer. And yeah. And so I think that was probably what really broke me in jail and made it so bad was that right there was my hopes being destroyed like that. I was genuinely in fear for my life every day. I thought I was going to die. I thought it was my last day on earth. Travis County Jail was nice at first because they put me in the trustee program is what it's called. You get to work in the kitchen in exchange for extra meals and nicer room, I guess. I didn't like it. I didn't want to work. And so I would sneak off a lot. And one time I snuck off and someone followed me and they forced me to give them. I went back to the pod and I just started slamming my head against the wall really hard until the guards came. And so they said, do you want to go to the mental health ward? Or do you want to go to the public? Like, you can't be a trustee anymore. Do you want to go to public or do you want to go to the mental health ward? So I said mental health ward, obviously. I spent 4 months there, and 90 days into so I guess that's 3 months. 90 days in is when the indictment comes in, and I'm indicted in New Braunfels. So I'm transferred again. And I kind of had to relive that first experience of like getting my clothes back on, being put back into civilian, like getting all my stuff. And then going transferred again, was I get transferred and then more abuse starts there. A lot more abuse happens at this jail. I'm beaten a lot for mixing with the wrong people. And apparently that's a bad thing. I didn't know. And so I got assaulted several times by white supremacists for being a disgrace to the white race, they said. I was assaulted by one. I wrote all over the walls that if you don't let me go, I'm just going to kill myself. Like, I'm going to give you guys an ultimatum. You guys get a choice now. Free me or I die. And so I thought that was my trump card. It wasn't. The guard came by. He said, you sure about this, man? You really want to do this? I said, yeah. And so he went and came back with a bunch of them, and they handcuffed me and took away all my clothes and shaved my head and then put me in a room that was like just about as big as this screen. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I could reach my arms like this, and that's it. And there's no bathroom. There's a grate in the middle of the floor. A grate. How am I going to poop in a grate? With no running water. No sink. No water. And the lights don't turn off, so you don't know how much time has passed. You go to sleep, you wake up, how much time has passed? You don't know. Was homeless. And I lived out of my car and off of couches. My brother let me sleep on his couch for a little bit. I gained 190 pounds. I weighed 330 pounds at my highest. Now I'm 180. But yeah, I was homeless for a few years until I was playing League of Legends at my brother's house one day, and I met my fiance, and we hit it off. We've talked every day since then. It's been about 3 years, and I moved in with her. I think 6 months into talking with her. I just take care of her now, and she works, and I take care of her, and I get disability now. I filed for disability, and I won recently. It's frustrating to not get justice, but you just have to let go at some point of that notion, because you're not going to win versus the justice system.
I think everyone is in agreement that threats online are a reckless thing to do, regardless of intent. However, I don't believe Justin or Josh were going to hurt anyone, and I think that's the reason these cases are so alarming.
You can't say too edgy of things. Fair enough. I think that it should have been investigated thoroughly. That would have been great. They would have found out right away. There's no guns, no plans. This kid's just a doofus.
But at the same time, I don't expect investigators or the courts to handle these cases fairly. And rather than change the behemoth that is the legal system, I thought we'd go over some case law with our favorite free speech lawyer, so you don't end up in front of an old judge who doesn't understand why trolling someone in League of Legends is different than the Unabomber's manifesto. Imagine trying to explain why this joke is funny in front of a judge and jury.
He typed question mark. How can I get him to type it? I don't think you spell it like that though, no?
Is threatening speech, should that be disallowed? This is my defense lawyer, Mario, who helped me when I was sued by Ali Mavan, the scammer who wanted to silence me when I exposed his fake game he was trying to sell to the Department of Defense. Is that something that we should not allow in a civilized society where people have freedoms and rights that are respected? Where does threatening speech fall into all that?
Definitely, there are some statements that indicate someone has a willingness to do harm to someone else. And that fear that the threat causes, that apprehension, is deeply problematic. And I can understand why the criminal sanction is used to prohibit and punish such utterances.
What it comes down to is, how do you decide what is a true threat and what isn't a threat?
Yeah, so in American law, as to the freedom of speech, we have one of the, ostensibly under the law, one of the most broadest protections to the freedom of speech in jurisprudence anywhere on the planet. That isn't to say it always works out that way, but in terms of the jurisprudence, it's very strong. And there are categorical rules that apply to speech, that if the utterance falls within, or the ostensible speech falls within one of these categories, it's not protected. And so one of those is true threats. And there could be threats, as we'll talk, that there could be utterances or statements or communications that are also threatening, that don't qualify as a true threat, and that also may be not allowed under the law. But let's just talk about true threats, because that's a very common one. If a reasonable person would understand the utterance as conveying a genuine, inevitable form of harm. Doesn't have to be imminent, like in the next 5 seconds, but it has to be like it's going to happen. And a reasonable person would understand it as that. Then that is considered under American jurisprudence today to be a true threat.
I asked Mario about intent. We know that in cases of murder, whether you intended to kill somebody matters. But what about speech?
Usually when you deal with criminal law, and true threats are considered usually dealt with in criminal, not always. You can get with them, they can come up in places besides criminal law. But usually you're dealing with a criminal statute, and intent is usually a part of a criminal statute. Sometimes intent isn't specified in the law, or sometimes you're dealing with something that isn't criminal in nature. I once had a client who said something stupid on a college campus once, and whether his intent was there was not the issue. It was whether the school could punish him for the utterance at all, regardless of his intent. And so recently our Supreme Court said there has to be some level of scienter. There has to be some level of intent. And they said it has to be at least reckless. Can't be just negligent. You can't just be careless. You have to know that there's a real risk that someone's going to perceive the utterance as a real threat, as a real imminent and serious and genuine intent for harm to happen.
This kind of falls into these situations in the context of gaming or 4chan or one of these kind of really subculture niche, corners of the internet where law, old judges and the Supreme Court haven't had a chance to understand and digest the context of speech in RuneScape or in 4chan or whatever, right? And
well, sometimes they have. Sometimes they nonetheless get called to do so because someone calls the cops. And then the cops are looking through these chat logs, and they'll use them, the prosecutors will use them in the worst possible light, and they won't consider perhaps the context of what is normal in a RuneScape chat, or what is normal in 8chan or 4chan. What is normal when your anonymity is sort of presumed as part of your expression. What do these other sort of subcultures of the internet, what is normal there? What does a reasonable person in that subculture expect? The least speech protective view would be that, this is how a reasonable person in everyday society, whatever the statement is, we just look at the other, 12 people in the room, and what are those 12 people going to think? But a more speech protective view would say, look, the context really matters, and that local subculture really matters. And so it's not just a reasonable person, it's a reasonable person writing on 4chan. It's a reasonable person playing this MMO or this other multiplayer online game where trash talk is extremely common. In fact, some people just go there for the trash talk.
Two boxers are about to fight each other, and somebody on Twitter says, I'm going to destroy you, I'm going to end your life. You're never, that in that context even could be, is totally different than, say, at a college campus or at a workplace or something,
right.
know?
So, and hyperbole is totally protected. Parody is totally protected. Jokes are totally protected, but it doesn't have to be a good joke. It doesn't have to be good parody, or it doesn't have to be good hyperbole. But if a reasonable person would understand it in its context as conveying a genuine intent that harm should happen, then that's at least how the court, in theory, applies the rule. I think in practice, applying the rule gets a lot messier in a lot of cases.
I hope this video has given you a different perspective. Personally, I went on an emotional roller coaster researching this topic. I wish I could have gotten into contact with Red Fox, the gamer who reported Josh. I was able to track down his full name, phone number, previous addresses, but after a few weeks of no response, I decided to just truck on and make the video. But I still wonder, did he think Josh needed to go to prison? Or was he just counter-trolling to get Josh chat banned? And did the concerned mother in Canada who reported Justin truly believe she saved children from having their hearts eaten? And Josh's ex-girlfriends, I feel confident that their testimony is questionable at best. I hired several private investigator types to track them down, but I could not get them to respond. But that's life. Stay tuned on my second channel for a deep dive on a topic somewhat related to this video. I came across one of the worst TED Talks ever. I look forward to seeing you all in the next video.